Welcome, everyone, to the Thursday edition of Fair Territory. I'm Ken Rosenthal here with Alanna Rizzo. Big news last night, and really, we are down to only a handful of free agents. The best remaining free agent at this point, probably Zack Gallen. But Alanna, we're not going to be talking much about Zack Gallen this morning.
No, it's more about Framber Valdez. Great to be with you, Ken, and the Fair Territory crowd. Yesterday, we thought, hey, you know what? Maybe the Pirates are going to get Framber Valdez and put him into that rotation. However, Ken, as you know best, another team has emerged. Framber Valdez appears to be off the board.
He is definitely off the board, and he is pending a physical with the Detroit Tigers. 3 years, $115 million. And Alanna, it's so interesting that one move, just one, can change the entire perception of an offseason or of a team. You go back last April, actually, with the Blue Jays and Vladimir Guerrero Jr. That signing, granted, it was for $500 million, but that signing changed the whole vibe around the Blue Jays and kind of took the heat off of the team and off the players. They didn't have to answer those questions anymore, didn't have to worry about Vlad being a long-term Blue Jay. This offseason, Chicago Cubs last year did not get Alex Bregman. In fact, finished fourth for Alex Bregman. And this year they get him and people say, whoa, good move. That with Edward Cabrera and some other things, okay. The Cubs go. And now, with the agreement with Framber Valdez, the Tigers are in a similar position. When we entered yesterday, they were going into a hearing with Tarik Skubal, the two-time back-to-back Cy Young winner. They were looking at the loss and are still looking at the loss of Skubal as a free agent at the end of the season, with really no ace beyond that. Jackson Jobe will be coming off Tommy John surgery in 27, but he's still a young pitcher and he'll be coming off of surgery. So with this move, what do the Tigers accomplish? They put an ace in place, a co-ace in place with Skubal for this season, and protect themselves if Skubal leaves, because they have Framber for at least next season. He has an opt-out after 2 years in this 3-year deal. You can see it right there. There are some deferrals as well. So for the Tigers, this kind of takes the heat off in a lot of ways. And as I wrote today, after talking with a person who was briefed on their intentions, on their plans, that person said, we are not trading Tarik Skubal. Our intention is to win. It's been their intention all off season. They signed Kenley Jansen. They signed Kyle Finnegan, signed Drew Anderson. They haven't done a whole lot. Gleyber Torres took the qualifying offer. Jack Flaherty opted in. But they've been mostly quiet until now. And now you look at the Tigers and you look at them in a much different way than we did 24 hours ago.
And he's reuniting with AJ Hinch, obviously, with the time with the Houston Astros. It's not a huge reunion, Ken, because as you were stating in our production meeting, Framber wasn't there for very long while AJ was there. But that's got to mean something in terms of the familiarity, not only for the manager, but for the player.
No question, Alanna. And Framber Valdez was first with the Astros in 2018, kind of a cup of coffee type situation. Then 2019, he wasn't even a full-time starter then, so that was A.J. Hinch's experience with him. But clearly, A.J. Hinch is tied into members of the Astros organization. Over the years has, I'm sure, talked to members of the Astros organization about Framber Valdez, and clearly, in this case, gave the go-ahead. Said, yes, let's do this. We can make this work. Yes, there have been questions about Framber Valdez's makeup, but now he goes with a manager with whom he is familiar, a manager who is familiar with him. It can only help. So this, for the Tigers, is a transformative move, as we said. They have the outcome of the Skubal hearing. They will expect to learn today. That should happen. We should hear this at some point today, whether Skubal gets $32 million or whether he gets $19 million. It's one or the other in arbitration. And the feeling among many was, and I had heard this myself, turned out not to be true, but I had heard that if they lost, took a $13 million hit, 32 versus 19, then perhaps they would not have pursued another starter. The Tigers essentially, by doing this, said, the heck with that. We're going to get a starter. We're going to pay him big, and we're going to have ourselves a great 1-2 combination for this season and Framber Valdez for at least next season as well.
You mentioned the 1-2 tandem at the top of the Tigers rotation. It is a good one, of course, with Tarik Skubal and now Framber Valdez. But what about the depth of this starting staff, Ken? Are the Tigers now one of the best rotations in the American League?
I would say with that one, too, they're in the conversation. Beyond that, it's Jack Flaherty, Casey Mize, and Reese Olson. Not bad by any stretch of the imagination. Pretty good, actually. Is it as good as the Red Sox rotation with Crochet and Gray and Oviedo and, of course, Ranger Suarez and whoever else they put in there? Maybe one of the kids. I'm not sure. Will it be as good as the Blue Jays rotation headed by Dylan Cease and Kevin Gossman with Trey Savage having his first full season coming up? Will it be good as the Yankees once the Yankees, if they get healthy, have Garrett Cole, Max Fried, and Luis Hill? I don't know the answer to that, but certainly this puts the Tigers in the conversation. And as I wrote, it positions them playing in the feeble AL Central to at least be the kind of team you can dream on for being this year's Blue Jays. They're not quite there. Offensively, they're not quite there, but they have a couple of top prospects, Kevin McGonigal and Max Clark, that they expect to incorporate into their mix this season. And if they need offense at the deadline, then they can go get offense at the deadline. So I kind of like where the Tigers are. And if they go into a playoff series with Skubal and Valdez healthy, that's pretty good.
I tell you, and I like their rotation, or excuse me, I like their bullpen too, especially the back end of that bullpen with the addition of Kenley Jansen. You have Kyle Finnegan over there as well. I mean, they have three guys in that bullpen, Ken, that have at least 20 saves last year. I want to go back to the money piece for just a second. 3 years, 115 million is a lot of money and good for Framber Valdez to get that. But the comparison with the Tarik Skubal arbitration stuff and perhaps Framber Valdez's contract, we're not comparing apples to apples here. You yourself just said that even if they lost the arbitration case to Skubal, that it wasn't true that they were going to not go after a starter. So talk a little bit more about the money piece and what we should be looking at here.
Glad you asked, Alanna, because there seems to be a lot of confusion among fans, understandably perhaps, about the difference here. Arbitration is not the same as free agency. Arbitration, you're dealing with one team. Free agency, you're dealing in an open market situation. Arbitration is a system based on precedent. The whole argument in the Skubal case is whether he deserves to be paid more than David Price was in 2015 in arbitration. That's 11 years ago. Price holds the record for a pitcher, 19.75 million. Or should he be paid more like some of the better free agent pitchers today? And actually, what he's asking for is not even at that level, because while he's asking for a record for an arbitration player, Juan Soto holds that record at 31 million. He is not going to go to 40, but in this situation that he is in or was in, as a player with 5+ years of service, he can compare himself to free agents. So it's relevant in that sense, but when you're talking about his ask, which was 32 million, it was never going to be more than 38 that Framber Valdez just got, because he is, in his case, trying to establish a precedent in a big way. He's trying to go 13 million above the previous high for a pitcher. He wasn't going to go 20 million above. And the whole argument that MLB and the Detroit Tigers made yesterday, I am quite certain, is this is too much. It would break precedent. Where he should be is closer to Price. Now, we'll see what the outcome is of all that. But when you compare the two and you say, hey, wait, how can the Tigers pay Framber Valdez more than they're paying Tarik Skubal? It's two entirely different branches of the salary tree. So that is where the confusion might come in, but that should give you some clarity. We're talking about two different things. Again, the comparison Skubal could make in arbitration, yes. He could have compared himself to Valdez if he knew that salary was on the board yesterday. But it seems to me, and I have to talk to some other people about this, but it seems to me that Tarik Skubal didn't need Framber Valdez's contract to make his case. He had a pretty good case as it stood.
I would just take both of my Cy Young awards in there. I would set them on the table in front of Scott Harris and everybody there in the front office. And I'd say, please, sir, pay me $32 million. Enough said. I tell you what, Ken, it's a great week to subscribe to Tiger Territory. Kieran Steckley and Cody Stavenhagen had Tigers manager AJ Hinch on earlier this week. And you know they are the place to go for all things on the Framber Valdez signing. Subscribe on YouTube and share Tiger Territory with your circle. Of course, part of the Foul Territory Territory Network. Okay, moving on here on Fair Territory before we take our first break. Smart or silly of these teams, Ken, to run it back in 2026. And what I mean by that is basically running it back with the same exact personnel. We will start with the New York Yankees. Not a ton of difference in terms of additions, but they will get Garrett Cole and Luis Heel back.
Yes, and maybe Clark Schmidt as well. And people forget, and I don't want to be a Yankees apologist here. I'm not trying to be a Yankees apologist, but they did win 94 games last year. They did lose to the team that came within 2 outs of winning the World Series in the playoffs. I'm talking, of course, about the Toronto Blue Jays. They did not have a bad year. No, they didn't win the World Series, but they had a really good year. So to come back with essentially the same cast, and that's what this is for the most part. Okay, but they made some moves at the deadline to supplement their bullpen. Those guys will be back this year, Bednar and Doval. Those were off-season moves as well. And I am comfortable with them with where they are. Could they be better? Sure. And certainly once Cole and Heel and possibly Schmidt get back, they could be a lot better because they didn't have Cole for much of last year. So we'll see how it goes with them, but I did not hate their offseason once they got Bellinger back in the fold. They're okay. They're not going to be maybe the most dominant team, but they're certainly in the mix to be a World Series contender. I don't know that there's much question about that.
I misspoke. Carlos Rodon, obviously, is who I'm talking about to go with Garrett Cole and he's
it's
starting.
Rodon, yes, not Heel. Yes.
Sorry about that. That's my bad. All right.
My bad too.
The Philadelphia Phillies. Now, I will say this, though, before we stomp on them a little bit. They were close. At least they did do their due diligence and tried to get Bo Bichette. They did not get him. But are the Phillies smart or silly to try to run it back with that personnel?
Ideally, they would have wanted to change the mix a little bit. They've been talking about doing that for quite some time now. And Bo Bichette would have done that, would have accomplished that, would have given them another right-handed hitter, would have enabled them to trade Alec Bohm, which they certainly could do anyway, but they don't have a replacement without Bichette. I liked the move for them in that sense. What they're doing, obviously, is essentially running it back. They've changed out some pieces in the bullpen. Keller for Matt Strahm. They've re-signed Kyle Schwarber and JT Realmuto. They're still good, and they're going to be good. The question is, are they now getting to the point where they're older a little bit? They're a year older than last year, obviously. Yankees, you can make this case with too. And do they start to maybe diminish a little bit? And that's possible. It's certainly possible. But at the same time, they too are going to be quite competitive. They were quite competitive last year against the Dodgers in the division series. They could have won that series relatively easily. So again, I'm not going to condemn them. Would you have liked to have seen a fresher mix? Same with the Yankees. Yes, you'd always like to see that because new players bring in new motivations, just kind of a fresh energy. But I don't think they're a bad team by any stretch of the imagination.
And while he's not a new face or a new player by any stretch of the imagination, Ken, I'm so grateful that the Phillies were smart enough to get Kyle Schwarber back in that mix. I can't imagine Kyle Schwarber playing anybody else at this point or for anybody else at this point than the Philadelphia Phillies. Much more to come here on Fair Territory with Ken Rosenthal. Get those questions in. We are back with Grillin Ken right after this.
Fair Territory with Ken Rosenthal is proudly part of the Foul Territory Network.
Listen to authentic conversations and unique insights across a variety of shows hosted by esteemed writers and all-stars alike. The people who know our game best.
I'm happy to be on. You guys have been doing such a great job with this show.
We debate baseball's hottest news while also chatting with over 700 current Major League players in laid-back, long-form conversations unique to FT.
One of my heels on the baseline, and then it's just trust the guy's going to bunt it and crash as hard as I can.
Catch us live from baseball's biggest events, winter meetings, all-star games, and award shows with access the other guys wish they could get.
That was my whole key to hitting was I mastered BP.
Subscribe on YouTube and rate 5 stars wherever you listen. Support your favorites and share us with a friend. We are changing the way baseball is consumed, and we want you right there with us. The Foul Territory Network. Baseball, the way it should be covered.
All right, we welcome you in to Grillin Ken. Time to ask Ken Rosenthal some questions. And I'm going to start it off with another team, Ken, whether it's silly or smart to run it back, which essentially the same personnel. However, Framber Valdez is gone. The Houston Astros, what are they doing?
They did bring in Amai to replace Valdez in the rotation, so they're in a good place there. And other than that, they have not done much. They talked about trading Jake Myers, didn't happen. They've talked about trading Paredes or Walker, hasn't happened. In my opinion, one of those guys has to go. They have one too many infielders right now. There's no question about it. Paredes, more value. Walker's coming off a bad year, but Paredes, they see as a guy who could really help them. So, yes, they are perhaps in danger of the run it back syndrome. And certainly with what Seattle has done in adding Donovan now, and of course, re-signing Josh Naylor, they're going to be the easy pick in the AL West. But it's the same thing with the Astros. I can't condemn them. But at the same time, would you have liked to have seen a little bit more out of them? Would you have liked to have seen them maybe, and could still happen, of course, trade Paredes for pitching, whatever they might want? Yes.
It'll be interesting to see where Paredes ends up. A lot of folks thinking perhaps the Boston Red Sox on a short-term deal. Ken, I never thought that sitting here on February 5th, we would be talking about Zack Gallen still without a home. I certainly thought he would go before Framber Valdez. Not apples to apples there, certainly, when you're talking about those two starters. But what is going on in terms of Zack Gallen? Do the O's now pivot to him? What's your thought there?
Not exactly sure, Alanna, and I will caution, as I always do, we don't always know what's going on. I don't know that the Detroit Tigers were seen as the team was going to jump out for Framber Valdez. John Heyman had mentioned that a couple of weeks ago as a possibility, but it wasn't seen as a particularly strong possibility, particularly with the Skubal arbitration looming over them. So things are happening behind the scenes that we, of course, do not know about. Now, Gallen has been talking to the Arizona Diamondbacks, and in some ways, a short-term deal there with opt-outs makes the most sense. The Diamondbacks would not have to lose a draft pick to re-sign Zack Gallen. They wouldn't gain one, but they wouldn't lose one. And because Gallen is the last of the remaining qualifying offer players, the guy tied to draft pick compensation who is still out there, it is affecting his market. It always does when a player is not coming off his best year or is perhaps seen as not quite the same quality of free agent. That's why you saw four guys accept the qualifying offer this year. They didn't want to run into the situation that Gallen is in right now. So I can see him going back to the Diamondbacks. The Orioles would lose their third highest pick. It's a relatively low pick if they signed him, but there are other pitchers out there that they might consider as well. Chris Bassett, Lucas Giolito, Zach Littell, all of these guys, maybe not as good as Gallen, but he probably would cost more than them as well.
Another silly or surprise team, or smart team rather, in terms of running it back. Kenneth Crawley Jr. wants to know, what about the Guardians? Is it silly or smart to run it back for them in this upcoming season?
They have a lot of young players that they want to incorporate into their mix. Now, their payroll, if I'm not mistaken, and I'm almost positive about this, is lower than it was at the end of last year when they, yes, made the playoffs, but you would expect you make the playoffs, you could spend a little bit more money. They, for the most part, have not done that. So I understand where they are. Low revenue team that wants to take a look at some younger guys, and maybe those younger guys will pop and they'll be really good. But at the same time, should the Guardians have added? Would you be more inclined to like them in the AL Central if they had added? The answers to that are yes.
Last question here on Grillin Ken. Are the Red Sox done with their infield, Ken, after signing Isaiah Kiner-Falefa?
The answer is no. Jen McCaffrey wrote about this in The Athletic. They still want to add an infielder who will give them more offense. Now, IKF is an elite defender. He protects them at various infield spots, enables them some flexibility late in games, perhaps, if they want to insert him for defense. So he also gives them the ability to rest a Trevor Story on occasion. And whatever they end up doing at second and third base, he can be an alternative. But I still believe, and they still are, looking for a guy like Isaac Paredes, who is under control, I believe, for 3 more years, and would cost them, certainly, because, hey, a guy who is under control always is costly. But I'd have a hard time believing they're going to go into the season with this group and this group alone. They do need one more. They seem to be aware of that.
Okay. Somebody else asked if it was kind of a panic move on the Boston Red Sox to sign Isaiah Kiner-Falefa. I don't believe that to be the case. All right, much more coming up on Fair Territory with Ken Rosenthal. We will be back with our Dude and Dork of the Week right after this.
Hey, an easy way to support the show and wear super comfy clothing is by heading to foulterritoryshop.com. Yes, foulterritoryshop.com is loaded with Foul Territory gear and lots of Fair Territory gear. If you want to give some love to Ken and Alanna, go check out a hat, a t-shirt, and a lot more. Coffee mug in the morning? foulterritoryshop.com is the spot. Hey, when you get a chance, subscribe to Foul Territory on YouTube. We are getting very close to 300,000 subscribers on the channel and love all of them. So we'd love you to join us on that channel as we break down everything going on across the sport. It is baseball the way it should be covered at Foul Territory. Give us a sub. BetMGM account holders, today, how about an any sport parlay boost token? You can score a bigger payout if your wager with that token hits. Tokens can be used on parlays and on same game parlays. Gambling problem or concern? There's help. Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
Dude. Dude. Dude.
All right, Ken, who is your Dude of the Week?
It is going to be the Seattle Mariners with an assist from the Tampa Bay Rays. And I'm talking about the three-team trade that brought Brendan Donovan to Seattle, and it was facilitated by the Rays. If not for the Rays taking Ben Williamson in this trade and then giving the Cardinals some additional talent to supplement what Seattle was offering, this deal doesn't happen. So the Mariners are Dudes of the Week because they hung in there all off season trying to get this guy who they consider an ideal fit for them. And the Rays, because they are perpetually involving themselves in three-team deals, facilitating the processes, both of them Dudes of the Week.
All right, my Dude of the Week, a couple of people as well. It goes to Matt Gelb, of course, who did a great job of writing the article, but it also goes to Brad Lidge and Orion Kirkering of the Philadelphia Phillies. Matt Gelb, if you haven't read it yet, guys, in The Athletic, does a great job of kind of explaining the situation with Orion Kirkering of the Phillies, of course, and you know, what was a season-ending error for him. Now he's embracing the challenges ahead, and for him to be able to like go through what he went through, and obviously heavy on his mind throughout the, you know, he wanted to stay there in the off season. I mean, Matt Gelb gets really into the article. It's much better if you read it than you take my word for it. But Ken, I'm interested in your thoughts about this as well, because obviously Matt Gelb is a colleague of yours with The Athletic. But, you know, we sometimes forget, Ken, that these guys are people before they're players. And for Orion Kirkering to have to wear that in a city as passionate about their sports as Philadelphia, and kind of how he's embracing that is interesting. What was your thought on it?
Well, Matt Gelb is one of our superstars. That's first of all. And the story is amazing. I highly recommend it to everyone. And yes, Philly's a tough town. And what happened to Kirkering, as he says in the article, will stay with him probably forever. But it seems to me that in recent years, the fans in Philly have been pretty forgiving, if that's the right word. If you remember the Trey Turner slump when they gave him the standing ovation. And I expect Kirkering to be warmly received opening day. Now, if he struggles, different story, but that would be the case for any struggling player. But to see Brad Lidge, who was one of the class acts of the game when he was playing, and of course remains that way, reach out to Kirkering, having been there in some respects comparably with the Pujols home run in the 2005 NLCS, well, that just shows class. And it shows that the guys, the players, they're a family. And they know better than anyone what they go through in situations like this. And props to all.
Yeah. Props to Brad Lidge, props to Matt Gelb, and props certainly to Orion Kirkering. All right, time now for our Dork of the Week. Ken, as always, you have the honors. Who are you pointing your finger at this week?
Thank you, Alanna. Let's go with the Minnesota Twins. Okay. Now, not only did they have a mutual parting with their president of operations, Derek Falvey, shortly before spring training. That's unusual as well. But beyond that, they replaced Joe Pohlad with Tom Pohlad as their lead guy. And Tom Pohlad, in taking over, is saying, hey, we're going to compete. We're going to be good. Well, if you want to compete, you probably have to spend a little bit more money. It's been a sticking point with these guys for several years now, and they have new investors. You can understand why the change was made with Falvey. Tom Pohlad's new, the investors are new. They are a different group, and he obviously decided, I've had enough of this. But if you're going to sell yourselves as a competitive team, act like a competitive team. And until then, the Twins, well, their dorks of the week, but they will remain dorks until we see a little bit more proactive action from them.
I could not wait until my dork of the week because this is just comical. You have lived on the East Coast for a long time. You're no longer on the East Coast, but I am currently residing in the East Coast, and we're buried here. We are buried under snow. It's cold. It's awful. But the Atlanta Braves, Ken, they're not used to this weather in the South, and they decided to cancel Braves Fest because of the threat of snow. Well, then the National Weather Service in Atlanta wanted folks to send them pictures of the amount of snow that they got. There you go, Ken. There's a little sprinkling. I think that's someone's roof there on their car in Peachtree. Look at Decatur. Decatur just got slammed, Ken. Look at that grill cover. My goodness, how could they cope? Oh, wow. Not even an inch of snow. And of course, they made it a big deal. I understand you're not used to it, but coming from someone that lives on the East Coast, that's embarrassing, Georgia. That is embarrassing. The Atlanta Braves canceling Braves Fest, fans going nuts. I think they're going to survive, Ken. I think they're going to be okay with that snowfall there. What do you think?
They'll probably be okay, but I do understand the Braves because once this happens, and I lived in Baltimore for a long time, Atlanta, granted, is further south than Baltimore even, but once it happens in a place like that, that is not accustomed to it, it gets paralyzed. So the Braves probably did what they had to do, but come on. That wasn't a whole lot of snow. Wasn't a lot of action there.
And I understand too. I lived in Los Angeles for 7 years, and when it rains there, people act, they don't know how to, they lose their minds. They don't have any idea how to drive. Like, I get it. I understand, but I had to poke fun of it because
it's hilarious.
We're literally buried under 2 feet of snow in New England. All right. That's going to do it for us. If you're watching on TV, thank you. We're going to see you next time. We'll have a couple more minutes on the YouTube side right after this. All right. If you're still with us, we appreciate it very much. All right. A couple of fan questions that we're going to take here, Ken. Let's start with this. How the Mariners found out that Brandon Donovan was theirs. I didn't hear about this. So tell me a little bit more.
I wrote about this the other day, the day after the trade, and I love, Alanna, crazy trade stories. I love covering this stuff in every way, but crazy trade stories, crazy free agent stories, those are my favorites. And this one was right up there. So the Mariners were visiting the Washington State Capitol in Olympia, Washington, because the state Senate there was reading a proclamation, adopting a proclamation that day in honor of their season and in honor of Cal Raleigh's historic campaign. And their general manager, Justin Hollander, was standing in the gallery, kind of the balcony of the State House as this was going on, when on a group text with Chaim Bloom of the Cardinals and Eric Neander of the Rays, and of course, Jerry DiPoto of the Mariners, he got word from Bloom, you're good to go. We have a deal. Start the medicals, which meant start the medical review process, which is the last step toward finalizing a trade. At that point, he bolted out of there. There was a door that was locked. He had to get it unlocked. Contacted the Mariners medical people, said, okay, let's start the review on Donovan. Let's go. And that is how the Mariners found out that they were getting Brendan Donovan after all this time. And the funny part, well, one of the many funny parts of this story is that after Hollander got back and the ceremony was over, different aides and senators were gathered around DiPoto and Hollander, and Rick Riz was there, their broadcaster, Dan Wilson, their manager. And a lot of people were saying, man, it would be great if we could get Brendan Donovan. And Justin Hollander said, we're working on it. And they were working on it. They not only were working on it, they had him.
That's great. That is a good story. That's a fun one that ends in a good way. And Rick Riz, congratulations. It's his last year calling Mariners baseball. So enjoy your retirement year. One of the best in the business. Well, thanks everybody for watching and listening. Foul Territory is next. AJ Pierzynski, Eric Kratz, and Scott Braun are going to welcome in Bob Nightingale, Brock Stewart, and JP Sears. Fair is back on Monday with Ken. Talk to you then.